A wooded quarter-acre lot in Jacksonville costs more than a used car lot's entire inventory. An hour away, the same size parcel sells for less than $6,000. That gap is not a fluke. It is the entire story of Florida land right now. Coastal counties have priced out anyone living on a fixed income, and retirees are responding by moving inland into towns most people have never heard of, where land is still genuinely cheap. But cheap land in Florida always comes with a reason. Sometimes it is a missing water line. Sometimes it is a hospital 45 minutes away. Sometimes it is a subdivision platted 70 years ago that never finished building out. In this video, we go through 10 of those towns, what the land actually costs today, what it's like to retire there, and the specific catch behind each price tag. Some of these towns already have paved roads and public water, and the price you pay for that convenience shows up somewhere else, in a permit fee or an insurance quote. Others hand you raw acreage for almost nothing, and the price shows up later, in a well drilling invoice or a 100-foot septic line. We'll also flag the towns where the window is already closing, because in a few of these places the bargain won't last past this year, and the difference between buying now and buying in 2027 could be tens of thousands of dollars. Here are 10 Florida towns where retirees can still buy cheap land before prices skyrocket. Interlachen. Interlachen sits about 45 minutes from Jacksonville, St. Augustine, and Gainesville, close enough to reach a city when needed, far enough to stay cheap. It functions as a kind of pressure valve for the whole region, absorbing the buyers who can no longer afford those three markets. In the Interlachen Lakes Estate subdivision, wooded lots between roughly a fifth and a half acres sell for $6,000 to $18,000, with annual property taxes often under $100. Local zoning allows site-built homes, modular homes, and mobile homes on the same lot, which matters more than it sounds. It means a retiree isn't locked into a large construction loan just to have a legal place to live. That flexibility alone explains why this town shows up on so many retirement forums. The catch is underground. None of these lots have public water or sewer. A private well has to reach the upper Floridan aquifer, usually 100 to 200 feet down, costing $2,500 to $8,000. And the water that comes up often smells like rotten eggs from dissolved hydrogen sulfide, plus iron and calcium that stain everything they touch. Filtration systems to fix that run another $2,000 to $5,000. Add a septic system, and if the soil fails a percolation test, the county requires an engineered mounted system that can push septic costs past $12,000. None of that shows up in the listing price, which is exactly why so many buyers get surprised after closing. A lot advertised at $8,000 can easily turn into a $20,000 home site once the well, the filtration, and the septic system are all accounted for. And that math has to happen before an offer goes in, not after. Putnam County's cost of living runs about 12% below the national average, and the median home price of around $127,000 keeps property assessments low once something is built. The nearest hospital, Putnam Community Medical Center, is about 15 miles east in Palatka, with the larger UF Health Shands Hospital 30 miles west in Gainesville if something more serious comes up. But builders have noticed the same math retirees have. DJ and Lindsay and Boss Hart Realty are both active here now, and permits are climbing as Jacksonville and St. Augustine buyers get priced out and start looking west. Interlachen is still a bargain. It just isn't a secret anymore. Sunny Hills. Sunny Hills was supposed to be a golf resort. The Daytona Corporation platted it in the 1970s with a golf course and lakefront lots in mind, full clubhouse ambitions and all. Then droughts lowered the regional water table, and the 2008 housing crash finished the job before the vision ever filled in. What's left today is thousands of vacant wooded lots, most under a third of an acre, selling for $4,500 to $15,000, with larger mixed-use parcels along Daytona Boulevard running higher. What makes Sunny Hills unusual is that it already has public water, run by U.S. Water Service, so there's no well to drill and no aquifer to worry about. But the deed restrictions cut the other way just as hard. Private wells are banned outright, except for irrigation or a pool, so residents are tied permanently to the utility and its monthly bill, whether they like the arrangement or not. Mobile homes, manufactured housing, and tiny homes are all prohibited too. Every house has to be site-built with at least 1,200 square feet on the ground floor, with strict setbacks, including 30 feet from any waterfront high water line and an 8-foot buffer along interior sidelines. Even a screened pool enclosure needs a 15-foot setback from the rear property line. Washington County's cost of living sits about 15% below the national average, and property tax rates here are among the lowest in the state, somewhere around 0.5%. That combination is exactly what a fixed Social Security income needs. Northwest Florida Community Hospital is 18 miles north in Chipley, with more advanced care 35 miles south at Gulf Coast Regional in Panama City. The local draw is the Sunny Hills Golf Club and fishing on Boat Lake and Gap Lake, but D.R. Horton and Daytona are both building here again, and State Road 77 was widened to 4 lanes, cutting the drive to Panama City Beach substantially. Remote workers and young families are starting to notice what retirees found first, and that usually means the price window is starting to narrow. A town that spent decades as a half-finished golf course subdivision doesn't stay overlooked forever. Once a 4-lane highway cuts the commute in half, and Sunny Hills is already living that shift. Viking Estates. If Sunny Hills is a stalled resort, Viking Estates is the opposite idea entirely. Locals call it the Prairie, flat grassland bordering the Kissimmee Prairie Preserve State Park, sold in standardized 2.5-acre parcels for $21,000 to $35,000. There's no subdivision grid here, no golf course ambition, no clubhouse waiting to be finished, just open space and a lot of sky. The trade-off is infrastructure, or the near total absence of it. The Coquina Water Control District manages drainage canals and charges an annual assessment for them, but it has no legal authority to pave or maintain roads. Okeechobee County doesn't maintain them either. During the wet season, the dirt and sand roads flood or wash out completely, and reaching an interior lot can require a 4-wheel drive vehicle just to get home. Power lines run along the perimeter roads, but extending them to an interior parcel can cost thousands more, which is why many residents run on solar arrays, battery banks, and generators instead of waiting on the grid. Zoning here is agricultural and permissive, so mobile homes, tiny homes, and even equestrian setups are all legal without much friction. But Rollerson Hospital is 32 miles south in the city of Okeechobee, and emergency response times suffer badly on roads that wash out every summer. That's a real trade-off for an older resident managing a medical condition, and the bargain is already shrinking fast. 2.5-acre lots that sold for around $15,000 in 2021 now go for $28,000 to $33,000. With 12 to 31 track sales closing every month, a pace that signals speculators have already found this place. For a retiree drawn to total privacy, that's the real calculation to make here. The isolation that keeps Viking Estates cheap is the same isolation that's now attracting buyers who want exactly that, which means the discount and the demand are pulling in opposite directions at once. Indian Lake Estates. Indian Lake Estates was platted in the 1950s around Lake Weohiakapka, known locally as Lake Walkin' Water, and it never came close to filling in. Out of roughly 8,000 platted lots, fewer than 800 have a house standing on them, which leaves an enormous amount of legal, buildable inventory still sitting empty decades later. Wooded half-acre lots go for $10,000 to $18,000, with property taxes as low as $75 to $150 a year, some of the lightest holding costs on this entire list. What sets this town apart is that it actually has amenities run by the Resident Association Indian Lake Estates Incorporated, an 18-hole golf course, a par 3 course, tennis and pickleball courts, and a private marina with a fishing pier stretching 1,000 feet into the lake, the longest in Florida. That comes with mandatory HOA dues of roughly $350 to $400 a year, a cost most of the other towns on this list simply don't have. The catch is that infrastructure here varies lot by lot rather than town-wide, which makes shopping for a parcel more complicated than it looks. Main roads are paved, but many of the interior streets are still sand and heavily worn. Some blocks connect to the municipal water tower, others need a private well, and every lot needs its own septic tank regardless of which side of the line it falls on. Lakefront parcels also fall into FEMA flood zones that can require an elevation certificate before anyone builds. Advent Health Lake Wales is 22 miles away, which is manageable, but the real risk here is buying a lot without checking which side of the utility map it sits on, since 2 lots on the same street can have completely different costs to build on. It's worth walking a prospective lot in person rather than buying off a listing photo alone, because the difference between a connected block and an unconnected one is invisible on paper until the utility company sends back a quote. Port Charlotte and South Gulf Cove. Charlotte County was carved up decades ago by the General Development Corporation into massive subdivisions like Port Charlotte, South Gulf Cove, and Rotunda Meadows, and quarter-acre lots here still sell for $15,000 to $25,000. Unlike most of the towns on this list, these lots often already have paved roads and public water and sewer in place, and two hospitals, ShorePoint Health Port Charlotte and Fawcett Memorial, sit right in town rather than a long drive away. The catch is written into county conservation law rather than into the ground itself. The Florida scrub jay is a federally threatened bird that nests in the region's dry oak scrub, and large sections of Port Charlotte and South Gulf Cove sit inside its protected habitat. Building on a lot inside that boundary requires a habitat conservation plan permit with fees that scale by lot size, from around $2,000 for a small parcel up to over $23,000 for a lot over an acre. Those fees rise every year on a set schedule, and the county has stopped letting buyers lock in today's rate by prepaying, so waiting to build only costs more later. Clearing is also banned entirely from March 1st through June 30th during nesting season, and removing a protected oak without a permit can cost $500 to $1,000 per tree. This is the coastal trade-off in miniature. You get real infrastructure and real hospitals, and you pay for it in permitting instead of well drilling. For a retiree who wants to be near medical care without a decade-long wait for a paved road, that trade might be worth it. For anyone hoping to skip the paperwork, it won't be, and the annual fee increases mean the paperwork only gets more expensive the longer you sit on a lot. Unlike a well or a septic system, which is a one-time cost you can shop around for, the scrub jay fee is set by the county and rises on a fixed schedule, so delay here has a real predictable price tag attached to it. Lehigh Acres. Lehigh Acres covers about 96 square miles of eastern Lee County, one of the largest pre-platted subdivisions in the entire country, built on a scale that dwarfs almost everything else on this list. Half-acre wooded lots trade for $20,000 to $30,000, and the county-wide average works out to around $9,000 an acre, which still sounds like a bargain until the utility bill for a new build arrives. The real cost here hides in the hookup, not the land. Water and sewer are run by the Florida Governmental Utility Authority, and connecting a new home requires a combined impact fee of $6,127, split between water and wastewater, before a single pipe goes into the ground. Add Lee County's building permit fees, calculated per square foot of foundation, plus specialty electrical and plumbing inspection surcharges, and the gap between the land price and the actual move-in cost widens fast. Drainage is also uneven across the district, since the local services district that oversees stormwater lacks full county authority, leaving some blocks with poor drainage and no street lighting at all. Lehigh Regional Medical Center sits inside the plat itself, and Fort Myers offers a full medical network nearby, which is a genuine advantage over most towns on this list. But Lee County has grown by more than 2% a year for years running, and that growth is eating into the empty lot inventory through speculative single-family construction happening block by block. The affordable window in Lehigh Acres is closing from sheer demand, not from any single new law or policy, which makes it harder to predict and harder to time. A fee schedule can be checked in advance and planned around. A subdivision filling in lot by lot around you cannot, and that's the quieter risk buyers here tend to underestimate. Daytona Park Estates. Daytona Park Estates sits along the eastern edge of DeLand, reached off East International Speedway Boulevard, and its quarter-acre lots sell for $22,900 to $38,500. What draws people here is the absence of restrictions almost entirely. There's no HOA, no covenant, and no deadline to build after buying, a level of freedom that's rare even among the other unrestricted towns on this list. That freedom comes at the cost of self-sufficiency. There's no public water or sewer, so every lot needs a private well and septic system before anything else gets built. The local aquifer runs acidic with heavy iron content, and wells here typically run 60 to 160 feet deep, costing $2,000 to $7,000, plus another $2,000 for filtration to make the water usable. Many of the platted streets are still unimproved sand tracks buried under palmetto scrub and pine, so clearing and grading come before any construction equipment can even reach the site. Part of the subdivision also falls inside FEMA Flood Zone A, which means checking elevation before before buying is not optional, since it decides whether flood insurance and foundation engineering become mandatory costs. Advent Health DeLand is only 7 miles away, a real advantage for anyone worried about emergency access, and one of the shortest hospital distances on this entire list. And the signs of a closing window are already visible on the ground. Homes that recently finished construction here are selling for over $300,000 on streets that were unimproved dirt 3 years ago, which tells you how quickly this particular pocket is filling in. No HOA meant no one was ever going to stop that growth once it started, and that same lack of restriction that made Daytona Park Estates attractive to early buyers is now working against the next round of buyers looking for the same deal. Steinhatchee and Perry. Taylor County sits in Florida's Big Bend, and the coastal fishing village of Steinhatchee offers something almost nowhere else on this list does: actual waterfront access at rural prices. River corridor building lots run $30,000 to $50,000, while inland recreational tracts near Perry, 5 to 15 acres, go for around $92,000 to $95,000, a different kind of land entirely aimed at hunting and privacy rather than a home site. The reason this land stays cheap is written into the landscape itself. Roughly 24% of the county is wetland, and the coast has taken direct hits from Hurricanes Idalia, Debbie, and Helene in recent years. Building near the water means elevating the structure above the base flood elevation, usually on concrete pilings, and that foundation alone can cost $50,000 to $150,000, sometimes more than the land underneath it. Steinhatchee also caps structure height at 32 feet, measured from natural ground, which fights directly against the elevation requirement, since the piling foundation itself can eat up 10 to 15 feet of that allowance before the livable structure even begins. Doctors Memorial Hospital serves Perry, but Steinhatchee itself leans on EMS transport for anything serious, and that drive matters more here than almost anywhere else on this list. Taylor County's cost of living runs about 18% below the national average, among the cheapest here, but the real cost shows up in construction, not in the deed. And Steinhatchee's reputation as a scalloping and sport fishing destination is spreading well beyond locals, with the county tightening building codes and wetland setbacks in response, which will only push future construction costs higher for anyone who waits. For a retiree chasing waterfront at an inland price, Steinhatchee is a genuine find, but it's the one town on this list where the land cost is almost the smaller number in the whole equation. Bronson and Williston. Levy County trades ocean views for rolling hills and live oak canopy, and it draws a different kind of retiree, one interested in horses and space rather than a golf cart community. In Bronson, wooded lots between roughly 1 and 4 acres sell for $15,000 to $47,500, and a 6-acre parcel in Williston recently sold for $83,000, giving buyers a real range depending on how much land they actually want. The catch here is geological rather than financial on paper, though it becomes financial fast. Levy County sits on the Ocala limestone formation, hard bedrock close to the surface, which makes well drilling expensive and unpredictable compared to the sandy soil found elsewhere in the state. Standard sandy soil wells in Florida are relatively cheap, but drilling through limestone requires heavy rotary rigs charging $40 to $60 per foot or more, pushing a standard 200-foot well to $12,000 to $18,000, sometimes past $28,000 for a premium setup. Septic systems need imported crushed stone, like number 57 stone and limestone crusher run, to drain properly through the rock, adding another line item most buyers don't budget for. Nearby sand mining operations, including the active site in Bronson, can also add truck traffic and noise to parts of the county. Major hospitals require a 30 to 45-minute drive to Gainesville or Ocala, which is a real consideration for older residents managing regular appointments. Levy County's cost of living runs about 12% below the national average, comfortable for a fixed income, but the town's fate is tied increasingly to Ocala's booming World Equestrian Center. As that overflow reaches Williston, upscale horse farms are going up, and land values are rising right along with them. Bronson, still a step behind, is where the acreage math still favors the buyer, at least for now. Alford and Mariana. Jackson County sits in the far northern panhandle against the Alabama and Georgia border, and it holds some of the lowest land prices in the entire state. It's also the last stop on this list, and in some ways, the most extreme version of the trade-off every other town has hinted at. The further you get from a major city, the less you pay for dirt and the more you pay in distance. A wooded lot just over an acre in Alford sells for around $14,979, and a similar lot in Marianna goes for $16,500, often with no money down owner financing, bringing the monthly cost as low as $189 to $229, a payment closer to a phone bill than a mortgage. There are no HOAs here, no covenants, and zoning permits manufactured homes, mobile homes, container homes, and even living on site in an RV while building, provided there's a signed permit affidavit on file. That's about as unrestricted as land use gets anywhere on this list, and it's paired with something just as valuable for a retiree on a budget. Most of the land sits in FEMA Zone X, meaning high, dry ground with no flood insurance requirement hanging over the purchase, which quietly removes one of the biggest recurring costs that plague the coastal towns earlier on this list. The trade-off is distance, and it's a significant one. Major medical centers, retail, and commercial airports are over an hour away in Panama City or Tallahassee, and Jackson Hospital in Marianna handles local needs, but not much beyond that. Jackson County's cost of living runs about 22% below the national average, the lowest on this entire list, which helps offset that isolation but doesn't erase it. For a retiree who needs frequent specialist visits, the travel time alone can undo the savings from the cheap land itself, turning what looks like the best deal on paper into the most expensive one in practice, once gas, time, and missed appointments are factored in. Prices here have stayed largely flat for years, but a slow trickle of out-of-state retirees looking for truly unrestricted land is beginning to thin out the inventory of the larger parcels, the first sign that even the quietest market on this list is starting to wake up. 10 towns in, this is the clearest version of the trade-off running through the entire list. The cheapest land sits farthest from everything else a retiree might need. Line these 10 towns up side by side and a pattern appears that has nothing to do with luck. Every discount on this list is a receipt for something specific. A missing water main in Interlachen, a road that floods every summer in Viking Estates, a scrub jay boundary in Charlotte County, a limestone shelf under Bronson, an hour of empty highway between Jackson County and the nearest hospital. The land was never randomly priced. Someone, somewhere, decided that a missing utility or a distant hospital or a stalled subdivision was worth a lower number on the deed, and that decision is still sitting there for anyone willing to read it. What separates the genuine opportunities from the towns worth a second look is rarely the price tag itself. It's whether the catch behind that price tag is something a retiree can actually live with. A missing water line can be solved with a well and a filtration system, a fixed, knowable cost that can be budgeted for in advance. A 45-minute drive to the nearest hospital cannot be solved with money at all, only planned around, and that difference matters more the older a buyer gets. The towns with fixed one-time infrastructure costs tend to age well for their owners. The towns with permanent geographic trade-offs, like isolation or storm exposure, tend to test a retiree's patience in ways a spreadsheet won't show. Before signing anything, that means calling the county planning office to confirm the zoning actually allows the home you want to build, pulling the FEMA flood map to see whether an elevation certificate is required, hiring a local contractor to run a soil percolation test, and checking if you're near Levy County exactly how deep the bedrock sits before you commit to a well. It means checking the county GIS map for conservation boundaries and nesting seasons, confirming there's a legal easement for power and road access, and finally, pulling up the local millage rate along with whichever senior and homestead exemptions the county actually honors. The retirees who do well in these 10 towns were never the ones who found the single cheapest lot. They were the ones who read the fine print before the rest of the market caught up to them. None of these 10 towns is universally the right choice, and none of them is a trap either. Each one is a specific set of trade-offs written into the land itself, and the only real mistake is not knowing which trade-offs you're signing up for before the closing date arrives.